I buried it where no one would find it. The words echoed across the empty desert, carried by a wind that knew how to keep secrets, but some secrets refused to stay buried. Eliza Hart wiped the dust from her eyes, squinting against the late afternoon glare. The storm had passed through like a thief in the night, rearranging the land, revealing what should have stayed hidden. Sand dunes had shifted, rocks had tumbled, and the mail route she'd ridden 100 times before looked like foreign territory. She hadn't planned to stop. The postal station in Redstone expected her by sundown, and delays meant questions she didn't want to answer. But her horse, a sturdy mare named Dust, had other ideas. The animal's sides heaved, her nostrils flared. Water. She needed water. Eliza dismounted near a cluster of weathered stones, pulling the canteen from her saddle. "Easy, girl," she murmured, pouring water into her cupped palm. Dust drank gratefully, her dark eyes soft with trust. That's when Eliza saw it. A corner of wood barely visible, jutting from the sand like a broken tooth. She froze. Her pulse quickened. "Don't touch it," a voice inside her warned. "Walk away. Mind your business." But curiosity had always been stronger than caution. It was what got her this job in the first place. A woman willing to ride alone through hostile territory, asking questions no one else dared to ask. She knelt slowly, brushing sand away with careful fingers. The wood was old, darkened by time and weather. A box. No, a chest. Small. Portable. The kind a man might carry if he needed to move fast and travel light. Eliza glanced over her shoulder. Nothing but empty horizon. No riders, no witnesses. Just the wind and the fading sun. She pulled. The sand resisted, clinging like a living thing. Then, with a groan and a spray of dust, the box came free. It was heavier than it looked. Solid. Locked once, but the clasp had rusted through. Her hands shook as she pried it open. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth stained dark with age, was a single letter. The paper was yellowed, brittle at the edges, but the ink was still legible, and the handwriting, slanted and hurried, looked like it had been written in desperation. Eliza unfolded it carefully. The first line stopped her heart. "To whoever finds this, know that I am already damned. What I did for love, but love does not forgive murder." She read it again. Then again. Murder. Her throat went dry. She should put it back. Bury it again. Forget she ever found it. But her eyes kept moving, pulled by a force she couldn't name. The letter told a story. A woman named Sarah Merrick. A night 8 years ago. A choice that destroyed everything, and at the bottom a signature bold and defiant. Colt Merrick. Eliza's breath came faster. She knew that name. Not personally, but she'd heard whispers. Colt Merrick. A bounty hunter turned drifter. A man who lived on the edges of the law, never quite crossing the line but never far from it either. And now she held his confession in her hands. A sound cut through the silence. Hoofbeats. Distant but closing fast. Eliza's head snapped up. A rider approached through the heat shimmer, his silhouette dark against the burning sky. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the kind of confidence that came from a life spent in the saddle. She stood quickly, the letter clutched to her chest. Her heart hammered. Run, her instinct screamed, but her legs wouldn't move. The rider slowed as he neared, his horse kicking up small clouds of dust. He wore a wide-brimmed hat pulled low, casting his face in shadow, but his eyes, when they met hers, were unmistakable. Dark, haunted, sharp as broken glass. "That's mine," he said. His voice was low, rough, like gravel underfoot. Eliza swallowed hard. "You Colt Merrick?" He didn't answer, just stared at the box lying open in the sand, then at the letter in her hands. His jaw tightened, a muscle jumped in his cheek. "You shouldn't have opened it," he said quietly. "Too late," she whispered. For a long moment neither of them moved. The wind picked up, tugging at her skirt, stirring the loose sand around their feet. Somewhere in the distance a hawk cried out, sharp and lonely. Colt dismounted slowly, his boots hitting the ground with a dull thud. He took a step toward her. Then another. Eliza's grip on the letter tightened. "What are you going to do with it?" he asked. "I don't know," she admitted. Her voice trembled despite her best effort to steady it. "What did you do?" His eyes flickered. Pain. Regret. Something deeper she couldn't name. "What the letter says. Nothing more. Nothing less." "You killed someone." "I did." No denial. No explanation. Just cold, hard truth. Eliza's mind raced. She should ride to the nearest sheriff. Turn him in. Let justice decide. But something in his eyes stopped her. Not fear, not anger, just exhaustion. The kind that came from carrying a weight too heavy for too long. Why bury it? She asked. Why not just destroy it? Colt looked away, his gaze drifting to the horizon. Because forgetting and forgiving aren't the same thing. I wanted to forget, but I knew I didn't deserve to. Silence stretched between them, heavy and uncertain. What's your name? He asked finally. Eliza Hart. Well, Miss Hart, he said, his voice softer now, almost resigned. You've got a choice to make, and whatever you decide, I won't stop you. He turned and walked back to his horse, moving like a man who had already accepted his fate. He swung into the saddle with practiced ease, then looked down at her one last time. But know this, he said, the truth in that letter isn't the whole story. It never is. And with that he rode off into the dying light, leaving Eliza alone with the box, the letter, and a truth she wasn't sure she wanted to carry. She stood there long after he disappeared, the wind pulling at her hair, the letter heavy in her hands. Above her the first stars began to appear, cold and distant. And somewhere deep inside she felt the weight of a choice she hadn't asked for but couldn't ignore. What would she do now? Eliza didn't sleep that night. She sat at the small wooden table in her rented room above the postal station, the letter spread flat before her. A single candle burned low, casting long shadows across the page. Outside Redstone slept. Inside her mind raced. Sarah Merrick. The name circled in her thoughts like a bird of prey. Who was she? Wife? Sister? Lover? And what had Colt done that required a confession buried in the desert? Eliza traced the words with her finger, careful not to smudge the faded ink. The handwriting was uneven, as if written in haste or pain, maybe both. I loved her more than my own life, but when they came for her I couldn't let them take her, so I did what I had to do. I pulled the trigger, and I buried the man who tried to destroy us both. A man, not Sarah. Colt had killed a man. Eliza leaned back, exhaling slowly, relief mixed with confusion. Murder was murder, but context mattered. Self-defense, protection, or something darker? She folded the letter carefully and tucked it into her satchel. Tomorrow she'd ride to the county records office. If Sarah Merrick existed, there would be a trail. Marriage records, property deeds, something. But even as she made the plan, doubt gnawed at her. Why was she doing this? What did she owe a stranger who confessed to killing someone? Nothing, the logical part of her mind answered. You owe him nothing. Yet she couldn't let it go. Morning came gray and cold. Eliza saddled dust and rode west toward the county seat, a 2-hour journey through scrub and stone. The landscape stretched endless and unforgiving, a place where secrets could disappear forever. Unless someone dug them up. The records office was a squat building with peeling paint and a crooked sign. Inside, a clerk with wire-rimmed glasses and ink-stained fingers looked up from his ledger. Help you, miss? I'm looking for records on a Sarah Merrick, from about 8 years ago. The clerk's eyebrows lifted slightly. Merrick, you say? Yes. Do you have anything? He disappeared into a back room, returning minutes later with a dust-covered ledger. He flipped through pages slowly, his finger trailing down columns of names. Here, he said, tapping the page. Sarah Merrick, married to Colt Merrick, June 1868. Eliza's pulse quickened. Anything else? Property? Death records? The clerk frowned. Death record, yes. Sarah Merrick. Died November 1868. Cause listed as fever. 5 months. They'd been married only 5 months. What about Colt Merrick? Eliza asked. Any records after that? The clerk shook his head. Nothing. He disappeared after she died. Some say he went north. Others say he just rode into the desert and never came back. Eliza thanked him and left. Her mind spinning. Fever. Not murder. So why the confession? Why bury a letter claiming guilt for killing a man? She mounted dust and turned toward home, but a figure blocked her path. Tall. Familiar. Colt Merrick sat astride his horse, arms crossed, hat pulled low. You're a stubborn woman, Miss Hart, he said. Eliza's heart jumped. You followed me. I did. Why? Because I knew you wouldn't let it go. His voice was calm, almost resigned. You found something, didn't you? She hesitated. then nodded. Your wife, Sarah, she died of fever. Colt's jaw tightened. That's what they wrote down. But it wasn't true? He dismounted slowly, leading his horse closer. When he spoke again, his voice was low, edged with pain. She was sick, yes, but she didn't die from fever. She died because I couldn't save her. Eliza waited. The wind tugged at her collar. Somewhere a crow called out, harsh and lonely. There was a man, Colt continued. Name was Garrett Hayes. He owned half the land around here, and he wanted the other half. Our land. When I refused to sell, he came at night with 3 others. They set fire to the barn. Sarah ran out to save the horses. His voice broke slightly. He cleared his throat and pushed on. Hayes grabbed her. Told me if I didn't sign over the deed, he'd make sure she suffered, so I shot him, right there in the yard. 1 bullet, clean through the chest. Eliza's breath caught. And the others? Ran. But Sarah, she'd breathed in too much smoke. Her lungs, they were already weak from the fever she'd been fighting. 3 days later she was gone. Silence settled heavy between them. So you didn't murder your wife, Eliza said quietly. You killed the man who tried to take her from you. Same result, Colt said bitterly. She's still dead, and I'm still the one who pulled the trigger. But it was self-defense. You could have. Could have what? Told the law? Hayes had money. Influence. I was a drifter with a dying wife and a smoking gun. Who do you think they'd believe? Eliza looked at him. Really looked at him. The hard lines around his mouth. The shadows under his eyes. The way he held himself like a man braced for the next blow. So you buried the truth, she said. And rode away from everything I loved. He met her eyes. Now you know. What are you going to do? Eliza opened her mouth. Closed it. What was she going to do? Before she could answer, a voice called out from down the street. You there, Merrick? Both of them turned. A man in a sheriff's badge approached, hand resting on his holster. 2 deputies flanked him. Colt Merrick, the sheriff said. Been looking for you a long time. Colt's expression didn't change. Sheriff Brennan. Got a warrant. Murder of Garrett Hayes. 8 years old, but still valid. Eliza's stomach dropped. Wait. You don't understand. Step aside, miss, Brennan said. This doesn't concern you. It does, she said, moving her horse between them. I have evidence. A letter. It explains what happened. Brennan's eyes narrowed. A letter from a wanted man isn't evidence, it's a confession. Then let me testify, Eliza said, her voice stronger now. Let me tell you what I found. Colt shook his head. Don't, Eliza. But she ignored him. She pulled the letter from her satchel and held it out. Read it, all of it, then decide. Brennan took the letter, scanned it briefly, then looked up. This just proves he did it. It proves he defended his wife. Eliza shot back. Against a man who burned his barn and threatened her life. That's for a judge to decide. Brennan gestured to his deputies. Take him. Colt didn't resist. He dismounted calmly, let them bind his wrists, but his eyes found Eliza's one last time. Thank you, he said quietly, for trying. As they led him away, Eliza sat frozen in her saddle, the empty street stretching before her. She'd found the truth. But truth, she realized, didn't always set you free. Sometimes it just revealed how deep the chains went. Eliza didn't go home that night. She rode straight to the jailhouse, a squat stone building that smelled of old sweat and dust. The deputy at the desk looked up with tired eyes. Visiting hours are over, miss. I need to see Colt Merrick, she said firmly. I have information about his case. The deputy sighed. Sheriff's orders. No visitors until the judge arrives. When will that be? 3 days. Maybe 4. 3 days. Eliza's jaw tightened. 3 days for gossip to spread, for memories to twist, for a man's life to be decided by people who didn't know the whole story. She turned to leave, then paused. Tell him Eliza Hart was here. Tell him I'm not giving up. The deputy grunted something non-committal. Eliza walked out into the cool evening air, her mind already racing ahead. If the law wouldn't listen, she'd find someone who would. The next morning Eliza rode to the Hayes property. It sat on a hill overlooking the valley, a sprawling ranch with white fences and manicured fields, wealth built on other people's land, other people's suffering. A woman answered the door. Mid-50s, steel-gray hair pulled tight, eyes sharp as a hawk's. "Mrs. Hayes?" Eliza asked. "I am. What do you want?" "To talk about your husband, Garrett Hayes." The woman's expression hardened. "My husband's been dead 8 years. What's there to talk about?" "The truth," Eliza said evenly. "About the night he died." Mrs. Hayes stepped back slightly, her hand tightening on the doorframe. "I know what happened. Colt Merrick murdered him in cold blood." "That's not what happened." "You weren't there." "Neither were you," Eliza countered. "But I have evidence. A letter, written by Colt himself." Mrs. Hayes's lips pressed into a thin line. "Letters can say anything, doesn't make them true." "Then let me ask you something," Eliza said, keeping her voice steady. "Did your husband want the Merrick land?" A flicker of something crossed the woman's face. Hesitation, guilt. "Business is business," she said finally. "And arson? Threatening a dying woman? Is that business too?" Mrs. Hayes's eyes went cold. "Get off my property." "Not until you tell me the truth. Did your husband go to the Merrick ranch that night? Did he try to force Colt to sell?" Silence stretched long and heavy. Then quietly, Mrs. Hayes spoke. "Garrett did what he thought was necessary. This land, it's all we have, all we've ever had." "So you knew," Eliza said softly. "You knew he went there. You knew what he planned to do." Mrs. Hayes looked away, her jaw working. "I told him not to go. I told him it would end badly. But he didn't listen. He never listened." "Then help me," Eliza pressed. "Tell the judge what you just told me. Tell them Garrett went there armed. Tell them the truth." "Why would I do that? My husband is dead. Bringing up the past won't bring him back. But it might save an innocent man." Mrs. Hayes met her eyes, something unreadable in her expression. "Innocent? No one's innocent, Miss Hart. Not Garrett, not Colt, not even you." She closed the door, leaving Eliza standing on the porch alone. Back in town, Eliza tried the newspaper office. The editor, an older man with ink-stained sleeves, listened politely but shook his head. 8 years is a long time, miss. People forget. And even if they didn't, nobody's going to risk their reputation for a drifter with a gun." "What about justice?" Eliza asked. The editor gave her a sad smile. "Justice is for people with money and names. Colt Merrick has neither." Eliza left feeling hollow. Every door she knocked on closed in her face. Every person she spoke to turned away. The weight of it pressed down on her shoulders like stones. That evening she returned to the jailhouse. This time a different deputy was on duty, younger, less rigid. "Please," she said. "Just 5 minutes. I won't cause trouble." The deputy glanced around, then sighed. 5 minutes, that's all." He led her down a narrow hallway to a row of cells. Colt sat on a thin cot, hands clasped between his knees. When he saw her, he stood slowly. "Eliza," he said, his voice rough, "you shouldn't be here." "Where else would I be?" She gripped the bars. "I tried talking to Mrs. Hayes. She knows what her husband did, but she won't testify." Colt nodded slowly, unsurprised. People protect their own, even when their own were wrong. "So what do we do?" "We?" He stepped closer. "There is no we, Eliza. This is my burden, not yours." "You're wrong," she said fiercely. "I found that letter, I opened that box. I made this my business the moment I decided not to walk away." Colt looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his eyes. Surprise, gratitude, maybe something more. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Why fight for someone you barely know?" Eliza didn't have a good answer. Or maybe she did, and it scared her to say it out loud. "Because you loved her," she said finally. "Sarah, you loved her enough to bury the truth rather than live with the lie that you failed her. That takes courage. And people like that deserve someone to fight for them." Colt's throat worked. He reached through the bars, his calloused hand brushing hers. The touch was brief, tentative, but it sent warmth spreading through her chest. "Thank you," he whispered. "Don't thank me yet," Eliza said. "I haven't given up." The deputy cleared his throat. "Time's up, miss." Eliza squeezed Colt's hand once, then let go. As she walked away, she felt his eyes on her back, steady and unwavering. Outside, the night was cold and clear. Stars scattered across the sky like broken glass. Eliza stood in the street, breath misting in the air, and made a decision. If no one would speak for Colt, she'd make them listen anyway. She returned to her room and pulled out paper and pen. She wrote through the night, her hand cramping, the candle burning low. She wrote about Garrett Hayes and his greed, about Sarah Merrick and her untimely death, about a man who defended what was his and paid for it with everything he loved. By dawn, she had 3 copies, one for the judge, one for the newspaper, and one for the sheriff. She delivered them before breakfast, slapping each document down with quiet determination. "Read it," she told the editor. "All of it, then decide if this town wants justice or just another grave." She didn't wait for his answer. At the courthouse, the judge's clerk tried to turn her away. Eliza pushed past him, marching straight into the judge's chambers. "Miss, you can't." "Your Honor," Eliza said, ignoring the clerk, "I have evidence in the case of Colt Merrick, evidence that changes everything." The judge, an older man with a weathered face, looked up from his desk. "Young lady, this is highly irregular. So is convicting a man for defending his dying wife." The judge's eyebrows lifted. Bold words. "True words," Eliza said, placing the document on his desk. "Read it, then tell me if you still think justice is being served." The judge picked up the pages slowly. His eyes scanned the first few lines. Then he kept reading. Eliza waited, her heart pounding. Finally he looked up. "Where did you get this information?" "From the source, and from records your sheriff chose to ignore." The judge leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "You realize what you're asking, to overturn 8 years of accepted truth?" "I'm asking you to see the truth that was buried," Eliza said. "Because if you don't, an innocent man hangs." The silence stretched long, then the judge nodded slowly. "I'll review the case," he said. "But I make no promises." It wasn't a victory, but it was a chance. And sometimes, Eliza thought as she walked out into the morning sun, a chance was all you needed. The trial was set for noon. By 10 o'clock the courthouse was packed. Ranchers, shopkeepers, women clutching their husbands' arms. Everyone wanted to see justice done. Eliza sat in the front row, hands folded tightly. She'd barely slept. Her eyes burned, but she sat straight-backed, determined not to show weakness. The doors opened. 2 deputies led Colt in, wrists bound. He didn't look at the crowd, didn't flinch when someone spat his name, just walked to the table and sat. But when his eyes found Eliza's, something softened. The judge entered. The trial began. Sheriff Brennan testified first. Garrett Hayes, respected landowner, found dead on Merrick property. Single gunshot. Merrick fled. Clear case of murder. The prosecutor nodded. "And the motive?" "Land dispute. Merrick refused to sell. Hayes pressed. Merrick shot him." Simple, clean, damning. Eliza's hands clenched. Then the prosecutor called his witness, Mrs. Margaret Hayes, to the stand. Eliza's heart dropped. Mrs. Hayes rose, dressed in black. She swore to tell the truth. "Mrs. Hayes," the prosecutor began, "tell us about your husband." "Garrett was a good man, a hard worker. He built everything we have." "And his relationship with Colt Merrick?" "Strained. Garrett offered fair price, but Merrick refused." "And the night of the murder?" "Garrett went to reason with him. He never came home." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Eliza stood abruptly. "Your Honor, I'd like to cross-examine." The judge frowned. "You're not counsel, Miss Hart." "Then grant me permission. I have relevant knowledge." The judge sighed. "Make it quick." Eliza approached. "Mrs. Hayes, you said your husband went to reason. Did he go alone?" A pause. "He took 3 men." "3 armed men?" "For protection." "Protection. At night. To a man's home, where his dying wife lay sleeping." Mrs. Hayes's jaw tightened. Eliza pulled the letter from her pocket. "This confession says your husband set fire to the barn, threatened Sarah's life, drew his weapon first." Gasps filled the room. "You told me yesterday you warned him not to go. You knew it would end badly. Why?" Mrs. Hayes's hands shook. "Because Garrett had a temper. When he wanted something, he didn't stop. So you knew he went there to threaten them. And when he died, you let everyone believe Colt was a murderer." Tears streaked her face. "My husband was all I had. And Sarah was all Colt had. Your husband took everything. And you want him hanged?" The courtroom erupted. The judge hammered his gavel. "Order." When silence returned, the judge looked at Mrs. Hayes. Is what Miss Hart says true? Mrs. Hayes wiped her eyes. Then quietly, yes. My husband went there to force them out. He set the fire. When Colt tried to stop him, Garrett drew first. The judge leaned back. Thank you, you may step down. He turned to Colt. Do you wish to add anything? Colt stood. I loved my wife. When Hayes came, I didn't want to kill him, but he grabbed Sarah, put a knife to her throat. I didn't think. I just pulled the trigger. Silence filled the room. This court will recess for 1 hour. When they reconvened, the judge spoke. After careful consideration, I find Garrett Hayes initiated the confrontation. He trespassed with intent to harm. Under the law, Colt Merrick had the right to defend himself. The charge is dismissed. Mr. Merrick, you are free. The courtroom exploded, but Eliza heard none of it. She watched the deputies unlock Colt's chains. He was free. Outside, the sun was blinding. Colt stood on the steps, blinking. Eliza approached slowly. You're free. Thanks to you. Thanks to the truth. He looked at her. What you did, risking everything. Why? Because it was right. Most people don't care about right. I'm not most people. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. No, you're not. What will you do now? She asked. Colt looked toward the horizon. I don't know. I buried everything out there. Maybe it's time to dig it back up. He turned to her. And if there's nothing left, then you start over. Build something new. Colt studied her face. Then he reached out and took her hand. Would you help me? Build something new? Eliza's breath caught. Yes, she whispered. I would. And for the first time in 8 years, Colt Merrick smiled like he meant it. 3 weeks later, Eliza rode back to the place where it all began. The desert looked different now, softer somehow, as if the harsh edges had smoothed in her absence. Or maybe she was the one who'd changed. She dismounted near the cluster of stones, letting dust drink from the canteen while she walked the last few yards alone. The box was gone. She'd returned it to Colt the day after the trial, but the place where it had been buried still showed a shallow depression in the sand, a scar that would fade with time. She knelt, running her fingers through the warm earth. So much had happened here. A secret unearthed, a truth revealed, a life saved. Thought I might find you here. Eliza turned. Colt stood a few paces away, leading his horse by the reins. He wore a clean shirt, his face freshly shaved. He looked different, lighter, like a weight had been lifted. I wanted to see it one more time, she said. The place where everything changed. He walked closer, stopping beside her. Together they looked at the empty space where the box had been. I came here yesterday, Colt admitted. Burned the letter, watched the smoke carry it away. Any regrets? No. He crouched down, picking up a handful of sand and letting it slip through his fingers. Sarah would have wanted me to let go, to live again. I just didn't know how. And now. He looked at her, his eyes steady and clear. Now I'm learning. They stood in comfortable silence, the wind moving around them like a gentle current. In the distance a hawk circled, its cry echoing across the empty land. I've been thinking, Colt said finally. About what you said, building something new. And? There's land north of here, good water, room to grow things. Start a small ranch, nothing like what I had before, but maybe that's better. Start small, start simple. Sounds like a good plan, Eliza said softly. I could use help, he continued, not quite meeting her eyes. Someone who knows how to keep records, handle correspondence, someone smart enough to challenge me when I'm being stubborn. Eliza's heart beat faster. That's a specific list. It's the only list that matters. He turned to her fully now, his expression open and vulnerable. I'm not asking you to give up your work. I know the postal route matters to you, but maybe when you're not writing, you could have a place to come back to, a place that's yours as much as mine. Colt, she started, then stopped, unsure how to put feelings into words. I know it's fast, he said quickly. And I know I don't have much to offer, just land and hard work, and a man who's still learning how to hope again. But if you'll have me, Eliza Hart, I promise I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of what you did for me. Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. You don't owe me anything. I owe you everything, he said quietly. But that's not why I'm asking. I'm asking because somewhere between finding that box and fighting for the truth, you became the reason I wanted to be free. Not to run away, but to build something worth staying for. The words hung in the air between them, fragile and fierce all at once. Eliza stepped closer. I spent my whole life riding alone, never staying anywhere long enough to call it home. I told myself I liked it that way. The freedom, the independence. And now? Now I think maybe home isn't a place, she said, her voice trembling. Maybe it's a person, someone who sees you, really sees you, and doesn't look away. Colt reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. I see you, Eliza, every stubborn, brave, beautiful part of you. She smiled, tears spilling over. Then yes, I'll help you build something new, on one condition. Anything. You let me keep riding, at least a few times a week. I'm not ready to give up the open road completely. Colt laughed, the sound rich and genuine. Deal, as long as you always come back. Always, she promised. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. She leaned into his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. For a long moment they stood that way, two people who'd found each other in the unlikeliest of places. When they finally pulled apart, Colt looked toward the horizon. We should head out, long ride ahead. Where are we going? North, he said, swinging into his saddle. To see that land I told you about, see if it's as good as I remember. Eliza mounted dust, her heart light. And if it's not? Then we keep looking until we find something better. They rode side by side, the desert stretching endlessly before them. The sun climbed higher, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber. Behind them, their tracks pressed into the sand, temporary marks that would fade by evening. But some things, Eliza thought, didn't need to leave a mark to matter. Hours later they crested a small rise. Below, a valley opened up, green with wild grass and dotted with cottonwood trees. A narrow creek wound through the center, catching the afternoon light like a ribbon of silver. Colt reined in his horse, his face softening. This is it. Eliza looked at the land, imagining what it could become. A small house near the creek, a barn for the horses, fields for crops, room to grow, room to breathe. It's perfect, she said. They dismounted and walked down into the valley together. The grass whispered beneath their boots. Birds called from the trees. The air smelled of sage and possibility. Colt stopped near the creek, kneeling to test the water. Clean and cold, good for livestock, good for living. Eliza stood beside him, watching the water flow. When do we start? Tomorrow, he said, standing and brushing off his hands. But today I want to do something I should have done weeks ago. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. When he unwrapped it, Eliza's breath caught. A ring, simple, silver, engraved with a pattern of leaves. It was Sarah's, Colt said quietly. The only thing I kept. I thought I'd never give it to anyone again, but I think she'd want you to have it. Not to replace her, but to honor what you gave me. A second chance. Eliza's eyes filled with tears. Colt, I can't. You can, he said gently. Because this isn't about the past anymore. It's about the future. Our future. If you'll have it. She looked at the ring, then at Colt, then back at the valley spread before them, and she realized that for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid to stay. Yes, she whispered. I'll have it. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. They stood together by the creek, hand in hand, while the sun dipped lower and the shadows grew long. Somewhere in the distance a coyote called out, wild and free. What do we do now? Eliza asked, resting her head on his shoulder. We start building, Colt said. One day at a time. One choice at a time. Until this place becomes everything we need it to be. And what's that? He turned to her, his eyes warm and steady. Home. The wind moved through the valley, carrying the scent of water and growing things. Above them, the first stars began to appear, scattered like seeds across the darkening sky. Eliza looked up, watching them emerge one by one. She thought of the letter buried in the desert, the truth hidden for so many years, the courage it took to uncover it, and the love that grew from the ashes of the past. I used to think the desert only held death, she said softly. Bones and silence and things too painful to remember. And now? Now I think it holds second chances. She squeezed his hand, for those brave enough to dig them up. Colt smiled, pulling her close. Then let's not waste ours. As the last light faded, they walked back to their horses. But instead of mounting, they gathered wood and built a small fire. They sat beside it, shoulders touching, watching the flames dance against the coming night. Tomorrow they would start building. Tomorrow the work would begin. But tonight, beneath a sky full of stars and beside a creek that sang its ancient song, two broken people allowed themselves to hope. Hope for land that would grow, for walls that would shelter, for a life built not on what was lost but on what was found. And in the quiet space between heartbeats, where words were no longer necessary, they made a promise without speaking. To honor the past but not be bound by it, to build a future worth fighting for, and to never again bury the truth, no matter how heavy it became. Because some secrets once brought to light become the foundation for everything that follows. And love, they learned, was the strongest foundation of all. And the end. If this story of survival, courage, and unexpected love touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe to Wild West Untold Love for more tales of redemption on the frontier. And if a moment or a feeling in this story stayed with you, we'd love to hear it in the comments below. Because sometimes the strongest souls are forged in the darkest places, and the greatest love stories begin with the simplest act of kindness.